Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome. We're going to speak tonight, B'ezrat Hashem, about Parshas Chayei Maras Machpelah. Machpelah means to be doubled. Kaful. In modern Hebrew, if you want to fold your clothes, you say your kapel. The idea of something which is kaful in the Lashon, in the understanding of our rabbis, is not merely something and something else. It's the same thing doubled. Everybody who's buried in Maras Machpelah is zoicher to a schar, which is kaful, a double reward. So I want to try and understand exactly what makes a person fit, roeh, to be zoicher, to be buried in Maras Machpelah. And I want to also discuss something which is very much in part of our lives today, which is the modern culture that we live in, and how that culture is really antithetical to the idea of what Machpelah stands for. And I want to start first with the discussion about the language of the age, which is film. When I say film, I don't mean necessarily acetate plastic with back in the day, nitrate or whatever it was, cellulose. I'm talking about the language of something which is now called videos and probably in 20 years will be called something else. It'll have metaphors, it'll have morphed into the metaverse and beyond. But it's interesting because at the time when film started, nobody understood that film was a language. Film started off basically as a penny arcade kind of entertainment. They used to invite people in off the streets of New York City to come in and see this the amazing thing of horses cantering across the screen. And people would go up to the screen and kind of see where the horses were. They peer through this, what seemed to be like a window. I mean, don't underestimate the fact we've become very blasé by this, but that was... You walked into a darkened room and there was, like horses jumping through the wall. And this really was enough to sustain the interest in film in the beginning. And this really, then suddenly, and really I don't know if it was sudden, but the more films were made, there was a discovery, and really this is where we want to come in, that a guy called Arthur Melbourne Cooper screened a small film called Grandma's Reading Glass in 1900, and this was the beginning of what we would call today film. I doubt anybody in the audience realized that what they were witnessing was the birth of a new language, because Grandma's Reading Glass is pretty thin on script. It's about a minute in length. And the plot is as follows. A small child looks through his grandmother's magnifying glass at various objects around the room. What makes the film notable, and of course from our point of view, this is something, point of view is, I guess, see it's a bit of a, how do you say, a pun, but from our point of view, this doesn't seem so dramatic, but you have to remember in those days, a film consisted of setting up a camera and pointing at a scene, and that was it, much like when a person would go to a theatre presentation. Nobody really thought about moving the camera. And what made Grandma's Reading Glass so revolutionary was what's called a POV shot, point of view shot. What made this film so revolutionary was that the camera actually had a view of what he saw through the magnifying glass, cut into the, the general kind of proscenium arch kind of, straight on, filming the guy, the small boy doing what he was doing. It cut to a view of what he saw, and this was something absolutely revolutionary and was the beginning of what we would call the syntax of film. That was the first understanding that film was a language. Film could tell stories. Film had its own verbs. Film had its own nouns. But interestingly enough, somebody called George Bluestone, who wrote a book called Novels into Film, which was basically describing how it was that you transform a novel into film. Made a fascinating observation, which is film has only one tense. There's no future tense in the film, there's no past tense in the film. A film takes place in a constant present. And you see that it's interesting because when film needs to go, let's say, into the past, you know, for example, you've always seen the scene where the hero goes, yes, it seems such a long time ago now, but I remember, and what happens, so, you know, the music swells up and the screen goes all fuzzy and there's echo. So 20 years ago, and then what happens? You're back to the present. Yeah. Film only has one tense, and it has this kind of rather awkward mechanism to depict the past, but really it's all the present. Now, this is something which I want to maybe dwell on a little bit tonight, to understand how that particular peculiarity of film is something which is very, very much part of our Weltanschauung. Our, when I say our, I mean the modern secular world's worldview. Film, as we know, has really taken over to the extent that, I've quoted some figures here, that there's in 2004, there was a National Endowment for the Arts survey that clocked an increasing decline in literary reading in the United States, which leaves fewer than half of America's adults reading literature. Wow. I don't think things have got better since then. That's the language of the age. And of course, the language of the age must tell us something about the age. Now, not only does film only speak in a continuous present, as we've said, but it also, that present tense has become increasingly abbreviated and compressed. I'll give you an example. Between the 19th and 30s, the average length of a shot in a typical American Hollywood A picture was between 8 and 11 seconds. In 1960, and more recently with the MTV and the how do you say, what was it now, TikTok and advertising has accelerated cutting rates to the near subliminal. Now, the reason why, of course, the cutting rates in advertising films are so fast is because you're paying big fat dollars for every single second. So you want to compress that message in as quickly as you can. But this, of course, that's a pressure, but financial pressures always lead to changes in art. This is always, you look at the Sistine Chapel. I mean, Michelangelo, typically art has to find a paymaster. And that's true with art, that's true with music. In the Baroque age, for example, people like Bach, that we now think of these as being the sublime composers, were employed by very rich lords and princes, like as their resident musicians, their resident composers, and they would be called upon on the spot to come up with an amazing fugue or a toccata. Wow. You know, that was their job, and you can imagine if they didn't come up with the goods, that's it. I'm sure Bach did pretty well. He was, prodigiously talented. But this financial pressure means that we're in the present, and this present becomes more and more abbreviated and compressed. And of course, it's an entirely different conversation, which I'm not going to get into now, that to what extent does this have on children's learning schools, learning skills in schools? I'm not going to get into the Ritalin debate, but for sure things have become more accelerated, more compressed, more immediate. The media stimulates an ability to now this, now this, now this, now this. And of course, a lot of things in life are not now this, now this, now this. For example, if a person wants to learn a Gemara, the primary qualification, the primary talent that a person has to learn a Gemara is something which we call in Yiddish holding kop, meaning focus. Extended focus, to be able to hold different ideas in your head and to compare them and to align them, contrast them. Now that requires focus, concentration, and extended concentration. Everything in the media and very much so the anti-social media, the weapons, as I call them, the weapons of mass distraction that sit in our pockets, work specifically against that ability and that necessity in order to learn. Let me give you another example. Not much more than about 150 years ago, a typical American night out on the town consisted of listening to 4 hours of political debate with no break and no ice cream lady prowling the aisles. Now, this required, if you think about it, an audience attention span that beggars the imagination. Flash forward, cut, right, to the 1960s. The Nixon-Kennedy presidential elections, where 60% of sound bites, now a sound bite is an uninterrupted monologue to camera, speaking to the camera by a reporter. It's called a sound bite. 60% of the sound bites are shorter than 1 minute. And of course, that seems like an age nowadays. And by the time George Bush Sr. took on Michael Dukakis in 1988, a soundbite had shrunk from 1 minute to 9.8 seconds, and not one of them as long as a minute. And I didn't do any research now, but I'm sure if you went and had a look at where we are now, you'll see that it's shorter and shorter and shorter. One of the basic concepts of Judaism is the idea of Olam Haba, the world to come. Olam Haba is something very difficult for us to believe in because nobody's seen it, nobody's been there. The Rambam points out an interesting thing. What's the corollary of Olam Hazeh? Olam Hazeh means this world. The corollary of Olam Hazeh should be Olam Hahu, this world, that world. But it's not. It's Olam Haba. And he explains that Olam Haba means that it's the world that comes, Haba, from this world. And this is what I want to talk about tonight. There is really nothing in Olam Haba which is not in Olam Hazeh. It's a replay of this world. It's a world that comes Haba as a result of this world. Let's try and go into this a bit deeper. The idea of a world to come, as I say, is something that's very difficult for us to conceptualize, to imagine. I once wrote a short story, which I'll share with you now, which I wrote to really kind of give a person a mashal, a parable as how one could maybe imagine Olam Haba. The story, the name of this short story is Neshama. Neshama. She had always liked her name. Neshama. A name which whispered the very breath of life. Neshama breathed in deeply the life-giving fluid in which she floated. Turning on her side, the life support cable gently undulated in the dark, liquid world like a lethargic sea snake. At a time like this, one thought of elemental things: name, life, the future. She was frightened. What lay ahead of her? As far back as she could remember, she had been safe in this secure water world, and now her life was drawing to an end. Death, non-being, the end of all she knew, of knowledge itself, waited her at the end of the tunnel. Like a puny raft circling the edge of a giant whirlpool, she felt herself being drawn inexorably down into the vortex. Panic rose in her mouth. A primordial fear of the unknown gripped her. I don't want to die. I want to stay here in this world and live forever. She had spent her days here in deep meditation on the secrets of the universe with her spirit guide. But now she was alone, and she knew this was the end. The time had come. It seemed that her ears filled with the most sublime music, a single chord of all the water voices sounding one wordless chord undulating through every known scale. The sound grew and grew. She was terrified of the pain, terrified of not feeling the pain anymore. Down and down she went, down to the world's end, down to the place of death. It was here, this was the end, it was over. It wasn't a particularly busy night in the delivery rooms at Hadassah Hospital. Another little soul had just come into the world, screaming and crying as though she had been summoned reluctantly to this earthly sphere. The nurse cleaned the little baby, wrapped her in swaddling to keep her warm, and gave the baby into her mother's arms. Can there be a greater sense of love than a mother feels for her newborn baby? The mother looked at her newborn daughter and thought to herself, "You are so beautiful, little neshama." We think of death as the end. Death is really birth. Birth in a different sphere, a different world. As we said at the beginning, Machpelah means to double. All of those people who are the founders of humanity, Adam and Chava, Sarah and Avram and Sarah, Yitzhak and Rivka, Yaakov and Leah, they are the founders of the world. A person can relate to this world in one of two ways. You can relate to it as the most fleeting thing in existence, a will-o'-the-wisp, an uncatchable frame in the movie of one's life. Or you can see the present as an unpolished diamond waiting to be turned into eternity. I've often said that Judaism is about turning the present into the future before it becomes the past. The syntax of film, as we said, the very language of our age, encourages us to think that the past and the future are not real. All that exists is a constant stream of now. But as I said, from the Jewish point of view, now is only something which is to be turned into the future before it becomes the past. And it's for this reason that a world that sees time in such a way spends most of its time escaping through white water rafting, paragliding, sipping margaritas around the pool, seeing the Mona Lisa, going to the pyramids, or climbing Everest, or by winning Oscars, or alternatively, you can see every single second as a building block to a future existence to which we are all invited. The Jewish view of time is an invitation. The word zman in Hebrew is connected to the word hazmana. Hazmana means an invitation or a preparation. To the best of my knowledge, there is no other language in the world where the word time and the word to invite or to prepare share the same root. Wow. This world is a hazmana. The time of this world, the very word zman itself, says that this every single second is to prepare, is to convert this into something which is eternal. I had a beautiful story that illustrates this. A parable. There was a young Torah student who arrived at an inn after a long and tiring journey. He was standing at the front desk, and he had this disturbing feeling that there's something out of place. What was it? He couldn't think. He checked in, and suddenly he became aware of a sound as familiar as it was out of place. Tick, tock, tick, tock. That was it. The clock. The innkeeper's clock. That clock, he said to the innkeeper, that clock is my Rebbe's clock. But how did you know, said the innkeeper? Because my Rebbe's clock is different to any other clock in the world. How so, said the innkeeper. Every clock in the world goes like this. Tick, one more second gone. Tock, one step nearer to death. Tick, gone. Tock, nearer to death. Nearer to death. Tick, tock. That's every clock in the world except my Rebbe's. My Rebbe's clock goes like this. Tick, one step closer to Olam Haba. Tock, one step closer to Mashiach. Tick, closer to Hashem. Tock, closer to Olam Haba. That is my Rebbe's clock. There's no other clock in the world that sounds like that clock. That's my Rebbe's clock. I've no doubt that that's my Rebbe's clock. So the innkeeper said, a few years ago, there was a rabbi staying at the inn, and when he came to pay the check, he realized he didn't have enough money, so he gave me this clock instead. It's your Rebbe's clock. Of course, it's okay. It's a story, but the point is clear. The first mitzvah that the Jewish people received in Egypt was the sanctification of the moon. In essence, that was the beginning of the Exodus, of the Yetzias Mitzrayim. Now, something axiomatic, something that comes at the beginning, contains everything that's supposed to follow. Sov ma'aseh b'machshava tehillah. The Vilna Gaon says that all of the Torah is contained in the first verse of Bereshis, and all of the first of Bereshis is contained in the first word Bereshis, which is contained in the first bet, which is contained in the dot in the middle of the bet. Whatever comes at the beginning contains everything that's supposed to follow. It's for this reason, actually, just tangentially, there's only one fast in the whole of the Jewish year that can fall on a Friday. No, on a Friday. No other fast in the entire Jewish year can fall on a Friday except Asara B'Teves, the 9th of Teves, 10th of Teves, excuse me. Why? I mean, if you think about it, Asara B'Teves, nothing really happened, right? Not a shot was fired, nobody got killed, and yet we fast. We're prepared to be mema'et, to reduce the pleasure, the oneg of Shabbos, by going into Shabbos hungry. We've had that feeling of standing on a Friday night with the Kiddush wine, and it's not a nice feeling to go into Shabbos starving. And we're prepared to do that because of Asara B'Teves. Why Asara B'Teves? Why not, Tisha B'Av? Tisha B'Av never can fall out. It's pushed off on a Friday or a Shabbos. And the answer is because Asara B'Teves was the beginning of the end. The beginning of something always contains everything that's to follow. It's a bit like an acorn. An acorn is really an oak tree. You just can't see it yet. Asara B'Teves, by the time Asara B'Teves had happened, the city of Yerushalayim was surrounded, was put in matzor or matzok. Nobody could get out, nobody could get in. It wasn't the end, but that was the seal. The end was sealed at that point. Everything that happened afterwards, so to speak, was just a denouement, was a playing out of the script that had already been put in place. So, if the first mitzvah that the Jewish people, if you and I, so to speak, were going to write the Torah, I'm not sure we would have started with the first mitzvah for the Jewish people, should it be the sanctification of the moon. Kiddush HaChodesh. And yet that is the first mitzvah. And the reason is that when Hashem gave us the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh, He was giving us much more than a mitzvah. He was giving us an entirely different system of time, which is what we're talking about. A system of time which leads to something, where every moment is a hazmana, is an invitation to something which is going to be happening in the future. To take you out of the Weltanschauung of now this, now this, now this. According to that worldview, there's nothing in the future, nothing in the past. The future doesn't exist and the past is already gone. It's just now this. Grab the future, go for it. When we read that a person, the eulogies of a famous person in the newspaper, and it says he had a good life. What does that mean? He, whatever, he flew around the world in an air balloon, he was the first man to do. But if you think about it, if all of life's experiences are really just those experiences themselves, then really life is no more than, because every single moment is basically dying and it's not there anymore. So if your life consists of a series of experiences of moments in the present, then really your life consists of, because every second is basically dying, right? So your life consists of individual moments of death, and then finally you get to the big death at the end of your life of small deaths. Very depressing. Wow. If that's what your life consists of, experiences. So experiences are only experiences when you're experiencing them. The idea of Judaism is no, you take every single moment and you are machpil, you double it. You convert it into something which is eternal. Wow. Let's get back then to Maras Machpelah. As we said, the Torah begins with the letter Bet, the second letter of the alphabet, to teach us that there are two beginnings to this world. There's an Olam Hazeh and an Olam Haba. There's a Shemayim v'han Oretz, a heaven and an earth. Now Chazal teaches Hayom la'asosam, today to do the mitzvahs, Umachal lekabel scharom, and tomorrow to receive their reward. But Chazal also tell us something else, which is schar mitzvah. So that sounds like a contradiction in terms. If today we do them and tomorrow we're going to get the reward for them, so how can the reward of a mitzvah be a mitzvah? I mean, Meforshim comment on this, and on a certain level, on the level that a person, by doing a mitzvah, he has the schus to be given more mitzvahs to do. But that's not pshat. On the most poshet level, the reward of the mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. So how can we understand this? How can that be? How can the reward be the action itself? To understand this, we need to look right back at the beginning of the Torah. There's one point I want to, before we get to that. We said, as we said before, that the world was created with a bet to indicate there are two existences. There's Aretz and Shemayim. We've mentioned this in previous meetings, but the word Aretz, the root of the word Aretz is ritzui, or ratzon. It's also, if you think about it, Aretz could be read as the first person future of arutz. Arutz means I will run. This world is a world of running towards. A world which does not find its fulfillment in this world, in contrast to the world that we've depicted where everything is the present. This is a world which is predicated on a future existence. Arutz, I will run. And where am I running to? Shamayim. Shamayim could also be read as shamim. What is shamim? The word in Hebrew for there, is sham. Shamim are all the possible theirs that could ever be. In other words, the entire creation is constructed as arutz, I will run to there. The word ratzon, desire. Desire is something which is going to happen in the future. All desire is for what's going to happen. Arutz l'sham, that is the way the world is constructed, as a process of moving, of running. The word, right, ratz, I'm going to run. I'm going to run where? To there. And where's there? Shamayim. Eretz for Shamayim. Shamayim means all the possible theirs that there could be. Now, with this in mind, let's understand, if you want to open up your Chumashim to page 4, and this is talking about the creation of the trees. Yud Aleph. V'yomer Elokim Tadshe Oretz Deshe Esev Mazriya Zera. Now, this is the bit I want. Eitz pri ose pri lamino. Eitz pri, a fruit tree, ose pri, making fruit, lamino according to its kind, asher zaraboy, ala oretz vayichein. And it was thus. Now, look at the next posuk. For totse ha'oretz deshe, esev mazriya zera. Okay, that's the same, lamino. V'eitz ose pri. Now, do you see any difference between this posuk and the one before?
Yes.
What's the difference?
It's pri ose pri.
It's an eitz pri ose pri. And what the earth actually did, and why it didn't actually fulfill the command that it should have done, is the subject of another discussion. But what the Oretz actually did was bring forth a eitz ose pri, not an eitz pri ose pri. What's the difference? So Rashi and Meforshim, Chazal teaches that the command of Hashem was originally that the tree itself should taste of the fruit. Eitz pri, ose pri. The fruit, the tree itself should taste of the fruit. But what did the land do? What did the world do? What did the ground do? It brought forth a tree where the fruit of the taste of the tree is the taste that we have nowadays, which tastes like wood, not fruit. What does this mean? This is a perfect simile for schar mitzvah. When we put on tefillins, for example, in the morning, really, if we were tasting the sweetness of the mitzvah, we would go meshuggah with pleasure. We would run around doing mitzvahs incessantly, because the action, the thing that brings forth the fruit, taste of the fruit itself. In other words, we tend to think of we do an action and we get a reward for it. That is not what the Torah tells us. Schar mitzvah. It means that the schar of the mitzvah is to taste the eitz pri, is that the action itself, the maisa mitzvah, the action of the mitzvah, is the reward itself. Olam haba is the revelation of all of those actions that were dry like wood to us, tasteless like wood to us. When we put on tefillin in the morning, we do not feel this feeling. I'm sorry. We may feel we're doing the right thing. We may feel good because we understand it's a mitzvah, but we don't feel the sweetness, the taste of the maisa, the taste of the mitzvah. Why? Because at this point, the world, the earth, brought forth a tree which the action, which is the fruit itself, does not taste of the fruit. It's dry, it's without taste. In Olam Haba is kaful, maras machpela. It's a repetition of this world. It's exactly this world repeated with a big difference. That the true taste of all of our maisim is revealed and experienced by us. That is why, even though hayom la'asosam, to do the mitzvahs, umachal lekabal scharom, but the schar is not something, it's not like a job where you do the work and at the end of the day you get your money. Schar mitzvah, the schar of the mitzvah is to really experience the mitzvah as it really is. That's what's being taught to us here. Those people who were buried in Maras Machpelah were those people who took every single second of their lives and they were kofel. They made it into a kefela. They took it and they transformed it into Olam Haba. Most of us spend a lot of our time involved very much in Olam Hazeh, and we take those precious moments, which each one of them could be transformed into Olam Haba, something which will come from this world, and we waste it on the fripperies of this world, the transitory pleasures of this world. All of the people who were buried in Maras Machpelah were buried there because they were mamash, in truth, doubled their existence, every second of their existence. It says that Avram ba b'yomim, he came with his years every single day, he came with his days. Every single day was doubled. Nothing was left to go. Yeah.
Okay, that also been a shot when it says in this week's question that God blessed Avram with everything. That meaning he understood the reward of the mitzvahs, and everything was seen revealed to him.
I don't know. It seems to me that in this world, a person can't experience Olam Haba. There's a Gemara which says that there was an Amora. Where is it? Yeah. There's a Gemara that says, Hey Olam Haba, for Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Omar, Elu b'nei Adam, sheyakrin hein ba'olam hazeh, v'kafuyin hein la'olam haba. Ki ha the Rav Yosef b'rei the Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, chalash, he became sick, v'is nagid. Ki hada, and when he came back from, like it was a near-death experience, we would call it. Amalei Avua. Avua said to him, "My chazis, what did you see?" Amalei, he saw Olam Hafuch Ra'isi. I saw an upside-down world. Eliolim Lamata, the ones who are at the top in this world, or at the bottom in the next world, V'atachtonim Lamala, and the ones who are in the bottom of this world are on the top. Klal Yisrael. Those of us who are involved in trying to become close to Hashem and giving up much of what the rest of the world considers to be desirable, we're on the bottom. But in Olam Haba, it's reversed. So he said to him, Olam La B'ni, my son, Olam Boro Ra'is, you saw a clear world. Okay, the Gemara carries on there. So I'm not sure it's necessarily true that Avram Avinu saw that world, but he certainly lived his life so that that he would experience that Olam Haba. Okay, so it's interesting that the word Machpelah, the Gematria is 175, which is the years that Avram Avinu lived. What we've been speaking about in terms of space, Olam Nefesh, and Shana, Olam Shana v'Nefesh, the three ways we understand the world. Olam is time. Shana is time. Olam is space, time and space, and Nefesh. Nefesh is the human being who perceives these things, who is able to understand what is time and what is place, and their connection. Basically, the kefela that you see in Machpelah, which is space, is also present in Shabbos. In other words, the Machpelah of space becomes Shabbos in time. Shabbos is that day of the week, which is Kaful. There's a Gemara, Yalkut Shimoni, on Tehillim, Perek Tzadi Beis. It says, everything about Shabbos, Mizmor Shir Liyom Shabbos, Tov Lo Dos ... Amar Rabbi Yitzchok, Kol Iska Shel Shabbos Kaful. Everything about Shabbos is double, just like Maras Machpelah. Just like that's the place, the Zohar says, of the gateway between this world and the next world. So Shabbos is Ma'ain Olam Haba, is so to speak an experience of the most you can experience of that world, Olam Haba, in this world. And so therefore, just like Maras Machpelah exhibits the kefela, the doubling of this world and the world to come, so Shabbos also. Let's see a few examples. Where would you see, maybe I'll ask you, where do you see the doubling of Shabbos?
The bread.
Okay, 2 loaves, very good.
2 souls.
2 souls, well, Hashem Yisera, an extra soul, I'm not sure it's 2, maybe an extra dimension of soul, but okay. So the Gemara says as follows, and please feel to interrupt me if you think of. So the Omra Kofel, remember on Shabbos the 2 loaves, that's what you were saying, because they got 2 Omers. It says Shnei ha'omer le'echod. The Korban, something we're not, Latzarenu, because of our Avonosenu, our Rabbi, our many sins, we don't have the Beis Mikdash anymore, but if we did, we would understand clearly that the Korbanah, the offerings of Shabbos are double. It says in the Pasuk, U'beyom HaShabbos Shnei Kavasim, 2 lambs. Its punishment is double. The punishment of not keeping Shabbos is double. As it says, Machalalea, somebody who desecrates it, mos yumos. Now in English it's true, they translate it as an emphatic, he will surely die. But the word, there are 2 words here for death, mos yumos. And also matan schara is kavul. And then he brings a posik for that. It's as hareya, as haraseya kafulois. It's the admonition to keep Shabbos is double, as it says in the pasuk, Zocha es Yom HaShabbos and Shoma es Yom HaShabbos. And also Mizmorah is kafula. It's the Tehillim, the Psalm of Shabbos is double because we say Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. Not just Mizmor L'Shabbos and not Shir L'Yom HaShabbos, Mizmor Shir, a doubling. Shabbos is the doubling. This world and the world to come, Olam Haba, lived through the connection to the tree itself, to understand that everything is in the tree. In this world we don't experience that, because the earth did not bring forth an eitz pri oseh pri. It brought forth an eitz oseh pri. And therefore we don't taste the sweetness, the reality that everything of the fruit is contained in the tree. Everything of the schar of the mitzvah is contained in the action of the mitzvah itself. And when we arrive at the world of kafela, then that reality is revealed to us in all its beauty and power. So let's sum up. We live in a world, based as we said at the beginning, the culture of the society we live in is predicated on the moment. Now this, now this, now this. This leads to an attitude to life which is inimical to Judaism, because everything about Judaism is about turning the present into the future before it becomes the past. Maras Machpelah contains those souls who every single waking second that they had was turned into an everlasting eternity. We come from that world. All of us in this room have plenty of experience of what that world teaches, of the go for it, just do it, take what you can, grab it while you can. And everything that Hashem wants to teach us is that we're given this very transitory existence, this brief walk, to take every single second and to turn that into something which will last forever, just like the Rebbe's clock. Every second of our life should be proclaiming there's a world to come. Tick. Mashiach is coming. Talk. Okay. Any questions?
I just thought of another thing. It says you shall not work on Shabbat and you should rest.
Well, I said that. Shama v'zocha. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't make that clear. I didn't translate it.
Yeah, right.
Shama v'zocha. Okay. Yeah.
What was the eighth pre-oseh pre that whole business? How did you make?
I'm sorry. Maybe I didn't make that clear. Let's clarify that. The Torah says, the first pasuk says, eitz pri oseh pri. Rashi explains that, what does it mean, eitz pri? Eitz pri means that ideally it should have been that the tree should have tasted the fruit. Now what does that mean? It means the tree, the means, by by which the source, the action. The tree is the source of the fruit. That the taste of the reward, so to speak, of the fruit is there in the action itself. If we lived in an olam haba dika world, as I said before, we'd run around doing mitzvahs without so, because it would just be so sweet, because we would experience the eitz pri, the action, the eitz.
So why did Hashem word it that he wanted to make it with the fruit and then decided not to?
He didn't decide not to.
Or he
The tree did not do what it was supposed to do. Now that's a whole other discussion.
Okay.
The Maharal talks about this, and maybe we'll go into it. The tree did not, because the tree. It's really a whole other thing. Maybe we'll. But you're right. It's certainly problematic.
I'm saying I love the idea. The whole concept is a great idea. But I'm saying, why does the Torah say, "Oh, Hashem was going to make it. The fruit was going to be the bark was going to taste like fruit"?
That's right.
And then decide, okay, no, it's
He
not.
didn't decide. That's the point. The tree, and it's that's because of the nature of the fact that this world is imperfect, because it's a recipient, because it's as we said before. There's Shemayim va'aretz. So the Shemayim is something which is unchanging. It's perfect. It's not possible for anything to change in Shemayim. This world is a world of change. In a world which is, because by virtue of the fact the Maharal says this, because of the fact that it is a creation. Anything which is, there's a difference between the creator and the creation. Because the world was a creation, because this world is imperfect, as we said, it's aretz, arutz, it's a world of striving, it's a world which is not perfect. Because essentially this world, because it's a creation, by its nature, it's something which is where change is possible, deviation is possible. And that's why in this world, the ultimate possibility down the chain from that minute change at the beginning becomes what we call evil. Evil is the antithesis of what Hashem wants. How is it possible? Because by virtue of the fact that the world is created, it suffers that defect. It suffers the defect of the fact that it's not a creator. Anything which is by definition created has the possibility of change, and change contains within that possibility the ultimate possibility of evil. So because the earth was created as a creation, it's not a creator, it's something which, so it has within it the possibility of change. That was why when it brought forth the tree had this was changed. It changed from what it should have been. So and then it goes on to say when Adam Arishan was punished for eating from the fruit, the tree was also cursed. Okay, this if we want to do this, we'll have to do it. Yeah, no, it's the Maharal speaks about this, and it's worth having a look at it. And he speaks about it on this posuk. And maybe next week we'll go into that Maharal, because that's an important thing. How is it possible for the earth to do something that Hashem didn't want it to do? So maybe we'll learn that Maharal inside. It's a possibility.
I don't think it is possible. I just think that it's just obviously the Torah is teaching us a certain way, a certain mahala.
But granted, if you can grant the possibility that it's possible that the tree didn't do what it was supposed to do.
Well, I guess Hashem could create a tree not to have that.
Well, that's the point. But that's what I was trying to say. By virtue of the fact that it is a creation, it contains within it the ability to change.
And I thought the point is that human beings were the only beings that had.
Very good. Okay, but the reason this is really.
Don't even have Bechira.
True. Okay. Let's maybe look at the Maharal. It's a while since I looked at it, so I don't want to, how do you say, sell the Maharal short. I mean, we should really see what he says. But I remember he talks about it.
The whole point is that you were saying is that if you could taste the fruit, if you could taste it in this world, then you said you'd have no real Bechira. You'd be running around doing mitzvahs all the time because you'd be able to taste the fruit. So Hashem's saying it's better if you don't taste it, so you understand, in your seichel that it's the right thing to do. And I'm giving you the Torah that you get a little bit of the time.
Yes.
You don't get
absolutely true.
Get the full view of it.
But the point I really wanted to bring out was that this idea of schar mitzvah means that the doing of the mitzvah, the action of the mitzvah, really contains all the taste within it, right. Just like an eitz pri. The action itself has the taste of the fruit. We make the mistake of just going for the fruit in this world. We don't understand for the pleasure. We don't understand that really what the real pleasure is in the eights, is in the action itself.
Sometimes you get that feeling, but you don't get it all the time. But most of the time you don't get it.
Ma'ayin olam haba. Okay, that may be. But certainly, I don't know about you, but when I put on tefillin in the morning, I'm not suffused with this supernal joy. I certainly don't.
I don't mind. I enjoy doing it, but I'm not feeling it like you said.
I mean, but if one really could experience the eighth pri of the maisa, the sweetness of the maisa contains all of the fruit in it.
Right.
That's olam haba. Olam haba is a repeat of this world with a revelation. The fact that everything you did contains the taste, contains the fruit, contains the reward. Okay.